On today's episode of China Explained, China increased its aggression against Taiwan and held a huge military drill in Taiwanese waters and airspace. Amid rising concerns about China, UK and Japan signed a defense deal, much to China's chagrin. Problems with the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, protests erupt in the port city of Gwadar. Before we get into the video, please consider dropping a like. Even though it is a small gesture, it means a lot to us. Thank you. And now let's dive into the video. High-profile visits to Taiwan in recent months from foreign dignitaries have gotten on China's nerves and spurred huge military exercises around the island by Chinese forces, which Taipei views as a rehearsal for invasion. China has also doubled down and renewed its long-standing threat to attack Taiwan. A spokesperson for China's Taiwan Affairs Office said on 11th of January that Beijing is committed to protecting the sovereignty and territorial integrity and foiling any plots for its independence from China. The spokesperson, Ma Zhaoguang, said at a bi-weekly news conference, "The malicious support for Taiwan independence among anti-China elements in a few foreign countries is a deliberate provocation." He went on to say, "We call on the relevant countries to cease sending the wrong signals to Taiwan independent separatist forces and cease playing with fire on the question of Taiwan." This kind of statement is infuriating, and it should infuriate you as well, because the ROC was largely responsible for the freedom of China from the Japanese occupation, with the CCP staying behind and not contributing much to the effort. Once the imperialist Japanese forces were defeated, the CCP came out of the woodwork and started a civil war, and since the forces of ROC were depleted, they were not able to defend the lands that they were largely responsible for freeing, and were forced to retreat to Taiwan. So in essence, the CCP never ruled Taiwan. So when they claim that Taiwan is a part of China, it should be seen as China's effort to colonize a country that has its own democratically elected government laws and cultures. And if in the modern world we condemn the practice of colonization, then we should condemn the practices of the CCP. A lot of countries have taken steps to help Taiwan, but they are baby steps. To truly help Taiwan, the One China policy has to be scrapped, and Taiwan will have to be acknowledged as a free country. This might infuriate China, but we must forgo our greed and hold China responsible for its actions. If we allow China to do as it sees fit, we are not far away from the day that China goes out on a full-fledged war against Taiwan, just as Russia did with Ukraine. Because the CCP has started to be questioned by the Chinese populace about the mishandling of the pandemic and the abrupt U-turn they took from the zero-COVID policy, not just that the Chinese economy has not been doing so well, so to prove its legitimacy, Xi will have to attack Taiwan just as Putin had to attack Ukraine, and it is in the best interest of the world to foil any such attempts from the CCP. Or else, news like China's military says it carried out military exercises around the self-ruled island of Taiwan that focused on land and sea assaults, the second such drill in less than a month, will be more commonplace. Speaking of, let us elaborate more on this recent military exercise held by the PLA. The People's Liberation Army's Eastern Theater Command said in a statement late on the 8th of January that its forces had organized joint combat readiness patrols and actual combat drills in the sea and airspace around Taiwan. Senior Colonel Shi Yi, a spokesperson for the command, said in a brief statement, "The exercises aim to test joint combat capabilities and resolutely counter the provocative actions of external forces and Taiwan independent separatist forces." The Taiwan Presidential Office said that the accusations made by China are groundless, and they strongly condemn these drills. They also made their position very clear by saying that it will neither escalate conflicts nor provoke disputes, but will firmly defend its sovereignty and security. The Taiwanese Defense Ministry said that in the most recent exercise, it had detected 57 military aircraft and 4 Navy ships operating around the island over the previous 24 hours, sharing maps on Twitter to show their flight paths. Some 28 of the aircraft flew into the Air Defense Identification Zone off the southwest of Taiwan. It added, with some crossing the Taiwan Strait Median Line, an unofficial buffer between the two sides. 2 nuclear-capable H-6 bombers flew to the south of Taiwan, the ministry map showed. The more concerning part is that the statistics show the Chinese military sent 1,727 planes into Taiwan's ADIZ in 2022, according to data from the Taiwan government. That compares with about 960 incursions in 2021 and 380 in 2020. So there is a clear trend that shows that the CCP is gearing up for something big, or at least provoking Taiwan to take the first step. So they have to be stopped before the problem becomes too big to manage and we have another Ukraine on our hands. Now, before we dive into the problems arising with the CPEC, which is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, and the protest in Gwadar, let's talk a little about the reciprocal access arrangement. On the 11th of January, the leaders of Japan and Britain agreed on signing a defense pact, which will result in troops being deployed in each other's countries. This agreement is the first of its kind, with a European country for Japan. This step comes amid growing concerns about China and its increasing military assertiveness and designs toward Taiwan, which it considers a renegade province. The British government said the defense agreement cements its commitment to Indo-Pacific region. The agreement is due to be signed by Japanese Prime Minister Kishida Fumio and UK leader Rishi Sunak during a meeting in the symbolic setting of the Tower of London Fortress, an 1,000-year former palace and prison that houses the crown jewels. Sunak's office said they will view Japanese armor presented to King James in 1613 by Shogun Tokugawa Hidetada of Japan to mark the first ever trade agreement between England and Japan. This deal has been in the works for years and was discussed with Sunak's predecessor Boris Johnson and Kishida during his previous visits to London in May. The British government said it will allow the armed forces of the two Group of 7 countries to plan and deliver larger and more complex military exercises and deployments. Since Britain's exit from the European Union, there has been a change in British policy, and it has diverted more of its focus to the Indo-Pacific region, and it sees Japan as its key ally. As Sunak said in a statement, "In this increasingly competitive world, it is more important than ever that democratic societies continue to stand shoulder to shoulder as we navigate the unprecedented global challenges of our time." This sentiment can also be seen reflected by Japan, as it has joined with Western countries in condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine and imposing sanctions against Moscow. Japan also has supplied Ukraine with helmets and other non-lethal military aid. Concerned about rapid weapons advancement in China and North Korea, Japan in December adopted key security and defense reforms, including a counter-strike capability that makes a break from the self-defense only principle it has maintained since its defeat in World War II. Britain has also become increasingly forceful in its approach to China, with Sunak warning in November that Beijing poses a systematic challenge to UK values and interests. It remains to be seen how China reacts to this news, but it goes without saying, there is sure to be a temper tantrum with the Wolf Warriors creating quite a ruckus about it. While China is facing pressure from the West due to its actions against Taiwan, it is now facing major issues with a protest rising in the port city of Gwadar, which is the crowning jewel of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC. Before we get into the protests that are currently taking place, allow us to refresh your memory on the project. CPEC is a 3,000-kilometer Chinese infrastructure network project undertaken in Pakistan. This sea and land-based corridor is aimed to secure and reduce the passage for China's energy imports from the Middle Eastern countries by avoiding the existing route from the Straits of Malacca between Malaysia and Indonesia, which in the case of war could be blocked and thus hampering the Chinese energy-dependent economical avenues. This project is also an integral part of the One Belt, One Road project, which aims to connect the entire world with China and essentially make it integral to the world economy by ensuring a monopoly on trade routes. Now, coming back to the current protests that are taking place in Gwadar, Gwadar Rights Movement leader Maulana Hidayat-ur-Rahman issued a warning to Chinese nationals to leave the Gwadar port area. Although media reports there are fewer than 500 Chinese nationals living in Pakistan, all based in the Gwadar port compound, this does not stop Maulana from issuing a threat to the Chinese nationals, who warn that if the government ignores their peaceful protests, the participants have a right to pick up and use weapons to protect our rights. This prompted a response from the Pakistani government, which took a page from China and swiftly blacked out all mobile and internet communications for almost a week. While the mobile networks have been restored, the internet has been shut down since December 28th. The Human Rights Commission of Pakistan has taken notice of the unofficial obstruction of information in Gwadar and asked the government to shed its tactic policy of relegating Balochistan to second-class status. Chinese citizens are facing increasing threats from different militant groups in Pakistan, with a rise in recent incidents of targeted attacks on China nationals. The growing anti-China sentiment in Gwadar may adversely impact the progress of key CPEC projects. The protests led by Rahman, affiliated with the Gwadar Rights Movement, have been going on for about 2 months. The protests mainly involve blocking Gwadar's port entrance and the Gwadar East Bay Expressway, a key artery connecting the port with Pakistan's main highway network, reported the maritime executive. The protesters also want the government to ease curbs on informal border trading with Iran, While these demands are not directly linked to Chinese projects in Gwadar, experts argue that many locals believe the developments are part of the problem. The protests erupted when the police raided a peaceful protest camp and arrested the leader of the Hak Do Tehreek Gwadar, or the HTT movement in English, which means Give Gwadar its rights. This was followed by mass demonstrations against the crackdown of the police and paramilitary forces. This movement has become a symbol of hope for the people of Gwadar in a very short period. Gwadar, with its deep water port, is a fulcrum for Pakistan and China's economic development projects, earning it the title of the crown jewel of the CPEC. The city is often envisioned as a future Dubai in the region, but the growing dissatisfaction of its people tells a different tale. Gwadar's residents remain deprived of access to clean water and other basic facilities. Gwadar, being a center of economic development, didn't manage to change the fate of its people. Rather, it became a source of frustration over local people's alienation from the local development projects, which are mostly managed by the Chinese or officers from other provinces in Pakistan, which is typical of Chinese investments in a region. Usually, the way an infrastructure project works is by flooding a country with a huge amount of funding, but when it comes down to the construction of these projects, the CCP forces the countries to hire all contractors from China, and this is partly how the CCP traps these countries in a debt. This phenomenon is also called debt trap diplomacy, and any such investments are not for the improvement of the country, but only further the goals of China. If you enjoyed the video, then please consider liking the video and comment down below if you have any feedback for us. Also, please subscribe as we post new videos about China every week. Until next time, goodbye, and we hope to see you in the next video.